My name is Mark, a recording angel. I've been observing this earth since the dawn of creation. The Most High has asked me to share my recordings with you. The following are my records of the church's early years and earliest believers, not just adults, but children too, collected in this book, Champions of the King, the Story of the Apostles. If today's recording contains situations which might be uncomfortable for younger listeners, I will mark the video with the words parental guidance recommended.
Vesta, aboard a ship en route to Rome. Vesta drew in a deep breath of the cool sea air as she walked carefully along the deck. Matteo, her new husband, wanted her to stay in the cramped cabin in the hull as much as possible, but she just couldn't stand it anymore. Never designed for passengers, it was just a tiny place where the captain could sleep in safety and lock any personal valuables from the other crew or occasional passengers who slept anywhere they could in the dank hold of the ship. "A ship is no place for women," he had said. "But I am taking you home, and Rome is a long way to swim from here." Vesta smiled. Her father had been concerned about the trip too, though she wasn't sure if it was because of the sea voyage or that he was saying goodbye to his only daughter. It was important to both Vesta and her parents that she marry a believer, but when Matteo had asked to take her as his wife, her mother and father found it hard to let her go. "I know that he'll treat you well and that you'll be happy," her mother sobbed. It's just that Rome is so far away." If it hadn't been that Paul was a friend of the young sailor, they might not have been willing to part with her. When Matteo noticed his pretty young wife standing at the rail, he hurried over to her. "I'm sorry," she said as he approached. "I just can't stay in there anymore. I had to come up for some air." "I understand," he replied. "The trip is too long to ask anyone who isn't in chains to remain below. Just please be extremely careful. I'm not sure whom I trust less, the crew or the passengers. I just want you to be safe." "Really? The only people I've seen so far look harmless. I've spent my whole life around bad people, and no one aboard looks as scary as the ones who came through my father's jail in Philippi." "Looks can be deceiving, my love," he murmured quietly. "See that man over there? I believe he is a runaway slave. The hole in his ear could have held a slave ring, but there's nothing in it now. If it contained a temple jewel to his goddess or some other decoration, he would still have it in, and there would be one in each ear." "Oh," she replied quietly. "Escaping slaves can be desperate people." She shuddered as she remembered the treatment that they had received when they had been caught and held in jail till their owners picked them up. Their owners could do anything to them, even beat them to death. Nobody could interfere, and slaves had no rights at all. No wonder they were desperate. "What about the other passengers?" she asked. "There's a pair of men traveling together from Ephesus, though they keep to themselves. They seem harmless enough. Another two boarded in Ephesus too, but say they are from Lystra. I don't believe them, though. One is definitely a Jew. The other one I'm not sure about. He speaks good Greek, however. They always seem to have a papyrus roll in their hands. At least they are only reading. Another Jew, who is horribly seasick and probably down below, throwing up even as we speak, also spends his time with papyrus and keeps scribbling. I don't think he is a writer, though. He doesn't look important enough. I think he's probably just a scribe trying to get the document copied before he gets to his destination for whoever his employer is. I'm so glad you don't get seasick." "Me too. This would be a horribly long trip if I had to remain closed up in that little room and seasick too. Aren't there any other women on this ship?" "Not usually," her husband said. "But this time we have one beside you." "Oh, good. Would it be all right if I talk with her?" "She's with the one who looks like an escapee. Always wears those heavy dark veils, so I don't know what she really looks like. She might be dangerous, too." "Oh, Matteo, I'll be careful." "If anyone bother you, yell and scream a lot. I have things I have to do, but I'll be around and will keep my ears and eyes open." He looked at her puffy eyes. Though she had never complained to him, he knew she was homesick. Perhaps getting out on deck and even talking to the other woman passenger would be good for her and get her mind off missing her parents. "It's only for a little while," he whispered to her. You will love your new home. We live outside of Rome, away from the crowd and the city smells. The estate has terrace vineyards and trees and beautiful gardens. My parents are believers too, as are most of our household servants." Vesta smiled, though her chin trembled a little. I know. I'm so fortunate to have been given a husband who's marrying me for love, and one who's a believer too. God has been good to me. I know it'll be all right. It's just that A tear escaped before she could stop it. She looked away, hoping he hadn't seen it. He had seen it, but wasn't sure what to do about it. After all, he'd never had a wife before. Seeing a woman he loved in tears made him feel as helpless as a shipwreck. "I need to take care of some things before the crew decide I am a soft-headed lovesick boy," he whispered. "Call if you need me." As Vesta gazed over the rippling water, she felt her spirits lifting. God didn't feel quite so far away out here. Now she stood, quietly whispering to him. It had been several years since she had first fallen in love with Paul's God. Remembering that night when the earthquake had broken the prison open and her father had stood with his sword to his chest, she shuddered. The apostle had kept him from committing suicide, and her family's life had changed that night. They had all become believers and helped form the nucleus of a new group that had grown rapidly. Her whole family adored Paul. A shadow fell across the deck as the woman from below approached the rail. Glancing at her, Vesta smiled. The other woman had covered herself so that only her eyes showed. Vesta thought she had the saddest eyes she had ever seen. "I'm Vesta of Philippi," she said. "Well, I was Vesta of Philippi. Now I'm married to Matteo, so I guess I'm Vesta of, I forgot the name of the place he lives, but it's a little way from Rome." "I'm Cassandra," the veiled woman replied. "I'm not really from anywhere. I've lived a lot of places. We're going to some place near Rome, too. You're married to the captain of the ship?" "Yes, well, no. Yes, we are married. We just got married, and Matteo's taking me home to his family. He isn't really the captain of the ship, though. Well, he is right now, but his father owns the ships, 2 of them. Matteo and his brothers and his father work together, but it all belongs to his father." "Congratulations on your wedding. I hope your married life is happy and fruitful," the woman said in a sad voice. "I thought he looked pretty young to be a captain of the ship." "Are you married?" "I was once, a long time ago." The young man with the empty hole in his earlobe approached them. "This is my son Onesimus," the woman said with the first trace of happiness.
"Mother, it's better if you stay with me," he said quietly.
"Oh, don't worry," Vesta protested. "My husband won't let anything happen to us up here, and I won't tell anybody who you are."
"Oh?"
He raised a dark eyebrow.
"And what is it you won't tell?"
"That you're Onesimus, and, well, I wouldn't tell anything else. I wouldn't want you to get caught or anything."
"See, Mother," he whispered, "it is dangerous for you to talk with anyone."
"I would never do you any harm," Vesta said angrily. "I know what they do to runaway slaves, and I'd never be a part of hurting anyone like that."
"That's just the point," Onesimus retorted. "I'm not a runaway slave. I am a freed man, and I have manumission papers for my mother, too. But when nosy people get an idea in their heads, it doesn't matter what it says on your documents. Sometimes people beat you first, and then look at your papers afterward."
He turned back to his mother.
"Please stay with me and don't talk to anyone else till we get to Paul's friends. Then you'll be safe and can chat with anyone you want to, I promise."
"Paul?" Vesta echoed. "Do you mean Paul of Tarsus? Paul the believer? Paul the great preacher? Paul who's been in prison in Rome? That Paul?"
The two turned to Vesta in surprise.
"You know him?"
they asked together.
"We love Paul," she exclaimed joyfully. "He kept my father from having to commit suicide in Philippi when an earthquake broke the jail open. Then he taught our family about Yeshua and baptized all of us. Later, he told Matteo and his father about my family, and he is the reason my family felt safe giving me to Matteo as a bride."
You are the jailer's daughter from Philippi? Asked Onesimus's mother. We've heard about you. Your father's helped grow a whole crop of believers in Philippi. Yes, that is true, Vesta answered. But how do you know, Paul? I was a slave, the man said. Mother and I were both slaves of a man named Philemon. Philemon became a believer a couple years ago. I escaped. He wasn't a cruel master as far as slave owners go, but nobody wants to live as a slave. I met Paul in my travels and became a believer too. Then he sent me back to Philemon. He wrote a letter for me to take with me. Obeying Paul and going back was the hardest thing I've ever done. I didn't know what would happen, or even if I would live through it. That must have taken great courage, Vesta murmured. I was terrified. Philemon was angry when I first showed up. The others grabbed me and tied me to the stake in the stables, while he decided what to do with me. I gave them the letter Paul had sent and then just waited. When my owner came out later, he told them to let me go. He brought me into the house, filled out papers, and gave me my freedom. And he had the courage after all that to ask for my freedom, too, his mother added. We're going to Rome. Paul has friends who will help us start a new life there. Onesimus finished. That's wonderful, the girl exclaimed. Matteo will be delighted. Paul baptized him too. The apostle traveled on one of their ships on the way to Rome. My husband was there. He's sure that if Paul hadn't been on the ship, he and his father would have drowned, as well as the whole crew. Amazing. Your husband was there? Is the story about the snake that bit Paul really true? The three were so busy talking that they didn't notice the two men from Ephesus listening to them. Are you talking about Paul of Tarsus? They finally asked. Onesimus's face darkened. Why do you want to know? He asked suspiciously. Well, Paul took me with him from Ephesus when I was disowned by my family after that big riot in the temple of Diana. The others nodded. They remembered hearing about the incident. He helped me find a new home and parents to adopt me, and he raised Eutychus here back to life. You're the boy who fell asleep and fell out the window while Paul was preaching? Onesimus asked incredulously. That would be me, the other man introduced himself. He still falls asleep sometimes in church, Lucas joked. Eutychus gave him a dirty look. Not very often, he growled. Only when you're preaching. It seemed as if everyone was talking at once, and the volume rose as each person spoke a little louder to be heard above the rest. Vesta, her husband grabbed her arm. Are you all right? Oh, yes. Matteo, you won't believe who these people are. It's so exciting. He pulled her to the side and placed himself between her and the chattering group. It can't be as exciting as what I just found out, he announced, grinning. You know the sick passenger in the hold. The one who's writing all the time. The very one. He's John Mark, the one who wrote the stories of Jesus that the believers have been sending around. Now he travels and preaches and makes as many copies of his original scrolls as possible so more people can read them. That is exciting. Do you think he'll share them with us? I asked him, and he say he's too sick to copy any more anyway, and that if we can find someone who can read Greek, we can read the stories all the way to Rome. Then he lowered his voice. I can't read Greek, can you? Vesta giggled. As well as I can read any other language. But I think there's probably someone aboard who can. I can read Greek, the soft-spoken man from Lystra interrupted. Good, Matteo said. And who are you? I am Elihu ben Malchus. Your name sounds Jewish. How is it that you are from Lystra? Matteo asked. I was born and raised in Jerusalem, but moved to Lystra as a young man, Elihu explained briefly. What can I read for you? Oh, wait, Vesta exclaimed, remembering what she had wanted to tell her husband. Matteo, these people I was talking to, they all know Paul. Paul? Elihu echoed. Paul of Tarsus, by any chance? Yes, yes, they all shouted in unison. Our Paul. Huh. Just wait till Timothy hears this, he said. Timothy, the young preacher? Lucas interrupted.
Yes, he's down below, trying to help that poor seasick soul. I'm sure he'd much rather come up here and meet friends of Paul. Timothy has a letter from Paul he received recently. He might be willing to share that with you, too.
Late into the night, the group sprawled on the deck, each telling their experiences. Even the seasick John Mark felt better. During the rest of the voyage, every waking minute not filled with the day-to-day work of running the ship, they spent sharing what the Mighty One had done for them. "We are all going to have to be more careful when we get to Rome," Matteo counseled one day. "Believers have been facing some persecution there now. Those who live in the city have had a hard time. Unless you have specific plans to meet someone there who can help you safely, perhaps you should come home with my wife and me, and we can assist you in making connections with the right people." "That is kind of you," Lucas said, "but we are meeting a servant of Cornelius. He is a retired Roman centurion who—"
"Cornelius,"
Vesta said with delight.
"the centurion whom Peter baptized."
"Yes, you know him?"
"No, but we've heard of him. It would be so exciting to meet him."
"Actually, my dear," her husband whispered to her, "they are friends of my family. Their estate is not far from our home. They are wealthy believers who support a new group springing up around Rome."
"John Mark and I would greatly appreciate your hospitality," Timothy said. "We have come to see Paul, so we will be needing to get into the city somehow. Perhaps you could aid us in getting there safely?"
"There are not many believers in the actual city anymore," Matteo explained. "After the big fire that destroyed so much of Rome, the emperor blamed it on the believers. Before then, many people didn't care much about us since we were members of a strange religion, but at least they didn't persecute us for that. Now the situation has changed. The believers who do live in the city are having to hide. Some of them have fled to a network of tunnels called the catacombs under the city. They were created as cemeteries. But now the believers hide, meet together, and even live down in them. It won't be easy getting to Paul. It's not like the last time he was in prison here. Then he was under house arrest and was a prisoner of the elite guard. Many of them became believers while he was with them. The authorities treated him well. We were able to visit him and bring him things he needed." "Where is he now?" Lucas asked. "The last I heard, he was in the Mamertine." Vesta shuddered. She knew quite a bit about prisons and jails from things her father and Uncle Ari had talked about.
"That's a horrible place," she exclaimed. "My father says it's a 3-level dungeon. The lower the level you're on, the less likely you are to survive."
Poor Paul, Onesimus remarked. He's already old and almost blind, and really arthritic from all the beatings he's received in his life. The man must be just miserable.
"Maybe not," Vesta replied. "He used to sing even when beaten so badly that he couldn't walk. Paul finds reasons to be joyful and praise God no matter what." "That is because the joy of the Lord is his strength," Timothy commented. "Without it, he would have died a long time ago." "I need to remember that," Vesta thought to herself. "If it worked for Paul and all the horrible things he's been through, it could help me. Even though feeling homesick and scared of meeting my new family isn't as important, the joy of the Lord could be my strength too."
"I heard that Peter's in prison in Rome too," Lucas said. "Do you know anything about him?" "I had not heard," Matteo answered, "but I am sure that Nero wanted him too. We need to keep both of them in our prayers. Paul is a Roman citizen, so it is technically illegal to torture him. Peter does not have that luxury."
This broadcast has come from the book Champions of the King by Sally Pierson Dillon, with permission from the Review and Herald Publishing Association. This book and the rest of the series, War of the Ages, can be purchased by going to www.adventistbookcenter.com or by calling 1-800-765-6955. I'm your narrator, Austin Backus, and this audio project is a gift to you from my free Christian book ministry, RXF 1888. Please visit our website, www.rxf1888.com, to request free Christian books for both kids and adults. and join us here again for more stories from Mark the Recording Angel.